Hi, everyone. My name's Alexis. First of all, thank y'all for coming to my TED Talk, also known as my reflection on my mock therapy session. Just need to start off with a quick disclaimer. I am coming back from a cold, flu, whatever shenanigan you want to call the stuffiness and the chest congestion. I'm coming back from that. My voice is actually just making a comeback. So I apologize. You might hear me clearing my throat often, or I'm trying to keep the cost to a bare minimum, but I can't promise anything. So my apologies in advance on that. Please bear with me on that. So with that note, let me just get started on my overall session. So in regards to preparation for the session, to be honest, there wasn't really much preparation in it because I want to be the most authentic first session between a therapist and a client that could possibly be. So, the client's gonna come in not really sure about what's gonna happen or who they're interacting with. And I, as a therapist, wouldn't really know what to expect to the client upon the first meeting. But I did have certain goals in mind for how I wanted the session to go with go through, if that makes sense. For one, I want the client to feel comfortable. I want the client and I to learn about each other. So I started off the session by introducing myself, what my credentials are, and I also advised what I do as a social worker, just so they'll know more about me. And I also made sure to specify that I am a mandated reporter. So anything that is disclosed will be between us will stay between us. But if it gets to a point to where the client is a danger to themselves or someone else, then as a mandated reporter, I am honestly authorized to report that. So, overall, the session I just wanted to be as open and as welcoming as possible, just making sure the client felt comfortable at the same time understanding what my role is as their, excuse me, what my role is as their therapist, and what they can kind of expect as a client. So pretty much that was just the gist of the preparation that went into it. In regards to the process, now before I go into depth with this, I gotta give a shout out to Jason because Jason, in my not so humble opinion, was the real MVP of clients. He came in open and receptive, and when we were going back and forth with our dialect, he was very introspective, and that kind of helped me springboard from one question to another and kind of say, okay, what can we do from this point to help improve? So, Jason, shout out to you. I once again, I can't thank you enough because you came through, and not only did you come through, you went above and beyond. So now that the shout out's done, let me jump into the process a bit. So I pretty much wanted Jason to, after he understood who I was as a therapist, just to start off with what he wanted to discuss. So I started off by asking how his week was going and what brought him in. And he really jumped right into how he, as a black man, sometimes experiences, I called it imposter syndrome, where he feels like he's not qualified, but he knows he does excellent work and he knows he has the skills and the qualifications. And that kind of springboarded into, okay, how does that tie into how we view ourselves personally and how society views us? And he was very descriptive with that, with how, he has tattoos and piercings, and how he was apprehensive at first because, society says, tattoos aren't a good look and piercings aren't a good look if you're going into this line of work or any line of work that requires you to be professional. And one thing that really resonated with me, and we also discussed how being people of color, we work twice as hard for half the recognition. And that I had to catch myself when we were discussing that because I felt that so deep to where I was like, "Man, you're preaching to the choir on this one," because I experienced this multiple times. So I had to catch myself and make sure I stayed present in the moment and realize my role, once again, is as a therapist, and I'm there to be a therapist to Jason, not make it so much about myself to where we're just having a dialogue about what struggles we've had back and forth as people of color. So that was just one thing I noticed I had to catch. Following up from that, I really wanted to make sure that the client understood that while his identity as a person is important and how he identifies himself is important, defending that identity is something that shouldn't be harped on so much. So as a once again, we related to this as a person of color, how we identify ourselves is very important, especially when we grow up in a society saying that everything about us is wrong, starting with the color of our skin. So I made sure that to emphasize how it is important to hold on to that and hold on to your blackness. Know that that's not who you are overall as a person. You know, I made sure to emphasize how Jason himself, how he views himself is important and how being black is who he is, but not something that he has to be. And once again, I just got to say, Jason was very introspective. And another thing I want to touch on is how I'm in awe of that because he disclosed, and Jason, once again, I hope you don't mind sharing this, but how in his line of work, he finally is positively came into who he is as a person. And, you know, even though he has tattoos and piercings, he works hard. He earns his roles and he owns his roles and responsibilities, and he does it with a passion. And if the organization doesn't want to recognize that, or they just can't go over the fact that he has tattoos and piercings, then that's not a place he wants to be in. So that set off something to me that said that is already a tool he has because he's already empowered. It takes a lot to go into an organization or a workplace and not conform to their standards. That is something that is monumental in and of itself. So I Jason, if I didn't give you kudos for that in this session, I definitely want to give you kudos now because that is phenomenal. And then we concluded with the session with how we can check in with ourselves. We discussed affirmations and we used the number scale. I believe the scale was 1 to 5, 1 to 2, not so great, 4 to 5, excellent. And understanding how it's normal to have days where it's 1 or 2, but when it goes into you're having a lot more 1 or 2 days more than 4 or 5s, then what's going on and what can we do to combat that into more positive thinking? That way you're not going down the rabbit hole of negative thinking. So overall, that was just a process as a whole. And I ended the process as though we would possibly have another session. So I think one thing that I'd like to do, I would definitely incorporate this in my practice as well, is I want to get the client um, to work on themselves outside the session as well. So I use these. This is the self love deck. I actually purchased these at the recommendation of a therapist at one of my former workplaces. I use them for journaling, and there are all types of introspective questions that can range from if you were to marry yourself today, what vows would you give yourself? Or even the one that I wanted Jason to reflect on was what environment do you most thrive in? And are you currently living in that habitat? Why or why not? So just something to help, build that foundation of skills and empowerment. And, also it's a springboard for something that the client and I can discuss for next session. That way, next session, we're not just staring at each other saying, okay, well, what do we discuss now? So yeah, that was just how the session overall went as a whole. And I honestly enjoyed reviewing it and reflecting on it. My initial reaction was I was surprised by how well I kept the the session going. Sometimes like I catch myself and I overthink certain things, which I think kind of showed in the session sometimes as well. I tend to overanalyze and overexplain. So if someone asks me a question, I kind of I don't only answer the question, but I answer the question as to like what happens if scenario happens, if this certain scenario happens, which it's something I'm working on. I can't explain why, but it's just something I do from time to time, and it's something I realized I do in a session, like, when I was discussing with Jason about how to do affirmations, and I would watch myself and I'd be like, "Okay, that's a good stopping point. Okay, but I'm still talking." okay, I'm still talking. So something that I'm definitely going to work on is making sure to keep the answers as simple as possible. And if the client does ask me for clarification, then that's when I say, okay, let's do A, B, and C if this happens. So just something I noticed. I also was surprised. I honestly surprised myself through this session, honestly. Um, I was just surprised by how I made sure the questions kept continuing the session, like it wasn't just an end all question, but it was something that can transition to a different topic, but somehow tie into what we were discussing in the session. I was just in awe that I did that because, like I said, I sometimes overthink and I pause and, I didn't want to have that awkward silence moment. So I want to give myself kudos for that. In regards to the peer feedback, I was shocked by how positive it was. Anais, Paige, thank y'all so much for your positivity and positive feedback. I, like I said, I wasn't expecting it at all. And they brought to the attention about how they liked how I introduced myself and how I was starting to work with the client on empowerment using affirmations. And I honestly was expecting to get ripped to shreds. I'm not gonna lie. I honestly thought like they're gonna tear my session to pieces because I could have switched a couple things. So overall, the feedback of my peers has been nothing but positive and uplifting. So Paige and I has thank you for that. And once again, I gotta give a shout out to Jason because I didn't realize how much of an impact I made from the mock session. After the session, both through the post as well as verbally, Jason expressed how he felt calm and how he was just as surprised as I was because I told him about how nervous I was before. And he said he didn't get that vibe from me at all. And the fact that I seemed so well put together while conducting the session and I knew what questions to ask and how to work forward and actually gave tools to help him as a client stay in that positive mindset was just like I said, I surprised myself with the session. So that's why that feedback was just as surprising, but I'm very much grateful for that feedback and I'm definitely going to work on making sure I keep that positive feedback going as well as improving on certain aspects that I need to improve on. So my plans for the future overall is to build my client focused type of treatment. Like I said, I really want to pride myself on making sure the client is fully aware that, they are in charge of their treatment. They have the power and the positivity and the tools that they need to overcome what they need to. Since I am going into trauma informed as well as substance misuse social work, I think this is a crucial type of treatment that I definitely need to get practice in. And it's wonderful that I'm already off to not a bad start at all. But like I said, there's still much I need to improve on. So thankfully, I'm just grateful for everyone who participated in the session. Jason, once again, thank you so much. I greatly appreciate you as my mock client. You definitely helped me get through the session because you weren't just sitting there looking at me. You participated, you were working with me, and then when we worked off each other, it turned into that much better of a session. So, Jason, another shout out. Thank you again. And that is honestly all I have for now. Thank you all so much for coming to my TED Talk. And y'all, real talk, just I know the struggle's real. We are almost there. Keep hope alive, keep faith alive, turn in those last assignments and as soon as y'all can. If not on time, then soon as possible. Um, I so grateful to have learned with each and every one of y'all and just thank y'all again.